The team has three main objectives for today's webinar. One, we will explore multi-test analysis, which is a new feature coming in spring of 2024. Two, we will identify how to evaluate student progress using multi-test analysis. And three, review findings in test analytics and single test analysis. And with that, I would like to send it over to Jeremy to get us started. Jeremy, take it away.
Thank you, Armando. In typical Eduphoria fashion, we'd like to get things started by getting you guys to kind of plug in and engage in the chat real fast, just to make sure we're all here and awake. I want to ask y'all a question. Spring break is just around the corner. What are you looking forward to most? Is it vacation plans that you have? Is it to start your reading list or continue it? Is it to visit family? Or is it to hit that snooze button? I see a variety of answers. I see a whole bunch of D's, some B's, some A's. I'm glad to see people are going to try to take vacation. Read and snooze is a great combo. Yeah, vacation, snooze. I think A and D are definitely in the lead. Excellent. We're going to move on, but if any of you have anything truly spectacular you're going to do for a vacation, drop that in the chat too, so we can all be envious as I keep going here. All right, so let's begin with a quick disclaimer. It's just a quick warning. The content that you actually see in this webinar is potentially subject to change for multi-test analysis. We're in those final stages of actually testing and tweaking it in that development. So you're not likely to see anything change drastically from this presentation until when it actually releases, but it's always worth warning you. What you see here might not be exactly what you end up getting. Additionally, if you attended the multi-test analysis webinar back in December, there's much of today's content that will be similar, but definitely stick around for the last portion of the webinar where Emily is going to tie in other features in Aware, at least one of which you may not even know exists, and how those things can be used to make multi-test analysis even more powerful. And I've also got a live demonstration on some of those features in MTA that would be different from the last time you may have attended the multi-test analysis webinar. So be looking forward to some of those differences. All right, so to begin, I have an opening activity, and I'll read it to you real fast. Victor is traveling to a log cabin for spring break. During his travels, he likes to see exactly how far he's gone in total. He started a log and wrote down all of his traveling for the first day of the trip. He flew from Dallas to Denver for a total of 793 miles. From the Denver airport to his cabin, a total of 17 kilometers. He unpacked and walked around the cabin for about 87 feet while unpacking, and then took an afternoon walk and took about 2,120 steps. Now, don't panic. I know there's math, there's numbers here, but we're not actually solving a math question right now. What I really want to know is, before we even attempt to do this math, what do we need to do in order to find the correct answer to this problem? What's that first step? Drop some thoughts in the chat real fast. Convert, so all the distances are a common unit. Jennifer hit it right on the head. Sean, conversions. Jill, convert the units. Yes, y'all are right on target. We have to actually convert. We have to get everything into the same kind of unit so that we can actually make comparisons across unlike metrics or unlike measurements. This is the exact same problem that many of you probably attending right now, being data analysts for your district or campus leads or district leads in other areas. It's a very similar problem that you all dive into anytime that you have to compare potentially unlike assessments. Your students, they're going to take local tests, STAR, the interim, MAP tests. Each of these things have their own sets of metrics, raw scores, performance levels, etc. And so it's the same kind of thing we're dealing with now. And it's what multi-test analysis is going to help you try to do without having to do a lot of the extra steps that you're probably already having to do now, including let's put some data together in something like a quick view. Now let's export it to Excel. And then let's use Excel to manipulate it. And I have to come up with formulas and I have to copy and paste things. Multi-test analysis' real purpose is to try to take all those conversions and all of the extra steps that you're trying to take so that you can do a comparison across assessments and just save a whole lot of effort and time in order to draw some really interesting conclusions about your assessment programs. We have With multi-test analysis, 5 different test types that we'll be supporting at first. Keep in mind, with most things that we develop, development will be continuing ongoing process, but the first 5 types of assessments we'll be bringing into multi-test include STAR, local tests, MAP, interim, and TELPAS. And you can see with each of those why sometimes comparing these things can be so complicated. With STAR, you have performance level indicators, raw scores, scale scores, percent scores. With MAP, you have RIT, percentiles, projected proficiencies. With TELPAS, you have yearly progress, raw scores, scale scores, composite, listening, writing, reading, and speaking scores. There's a whole lot of things that are difficult to mishmash together and actually make accurate comparisons across each of those tests. So how do you currently compare performance across assessments? Go ahead and drop an answer to this in the chat as well. Do you currently A, export the data into spreadsheets and create your own scales? Do you B, transfer the data to a third-party program and let them do the work? Do you C, assume the scales are similar enough to actually make comparisons? Or do you D, don't currently compare different types of assessments at all and try to keep it apples to apples comparisons? Lots of A's coming in. There's a B, transfer it to a third party, A and B, A, lots of A's. Those of you that are saying A especially, or a combination of A and something else, I really think you're going to find multi-test analysis to be extremely powerful for your local practices, because it's going to hopefully remove a lot of that need to export it and create your own scales, at least externally. We can do it all in-house within the multi-test analysis platform. Let's keep exploring. To continue, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Emily, and she's going to talk about the common scales with multi-test analysis.
Okay, so as we talk about common scales, these are really the big component that is challenging for us when looking at assessment data. Honestly, you know, this is why you're taking it to a spreadsheet. And I always joke when I present on this, but this is why you are masters of conditional formatting, right? Because you're really trying to draw these conclusions within the systems that you're using. So we like to start you out with this and really give you some things to discuss along the way. So let's talk about what you can talk at your district about regarding these. So I'll have you go to the next slide. There we go. So we like to start you out with a foundation of what can you even talk about, and not making assumptions that all of these things are already decided within your district. And so some great things to take about to your district and decide what assessments do we value highly? What are we looking at across multiple tests, and what are we using to draw conclusions? What do those conclusions tell us? And so a lot of times it is progress or it is performance, and making sure that you're really pulling the right metric to tell that story is going to be incredibly important. And so making sure that you have those conversations in order to really revisit the foundation of this, because then when you're sharing this data out across your district, everybody has a like mind in what they're looking at. If you're taking this a step further, are there programs you want to go ahead and evaluate that you've adopted? You'll hear that this tool is going to do that very well for you. So are there already lists of things that you're like, we're about to adopt new science teaks? Let's take a look at some things and see some areas of need that we've had across science for multiple years. So we want you to be able to draw those conclusions as you move forward with something large like that for your district. What is the sharing process for some of this data? We know you've probably already figured that out. But again, you may be doing this with spreadsheets, and spreadsheets aren't always the most fun to share out amongst your users. So we're going to provide you some deeper insight on what sharing will look like for multi-test analysis as well. And which, really importantly, what test types are you pulling in? And do you have all this data in Aware too? So I'll pause and take a step back, because even if you're looking at SAT, PSAT, if you're looking at a lot of that different data sources, you can pull that in here as well, and you can evaluate those across tests and across time. So it's not just limited to STAR end of year assessments. It's really any comparative end of year assessments that you would like to utilize in the program. So making sure that those are available and Aware may be a first step that you take in order to really fully utilize multi-test analysis. All right, so how we extend on this and how this is different than other tools is that you do have the capability to look at this. I really tried to underline the key factors here for you. Based on achievement levels over time. And so you can identify those achievement levels within your district, and they don't have to necessarily be subject to what you're used to seeing. You can self-define those. The purpose of this tool is really to allow you that time from spreadsheet world and being able to draw data analysis conclusions much faster over time. And then one of the key components that I absolutely love is the predictive analysis and determining assessment validity. And how I make this one very simple is let's not keep giving assessments that aren't giving us the data that we need to draw conclusions. So, the definition of insanity. Let's make sure that we're not continuing to follow this same pattern if it's not giving us the results that we need. And this tool is going to answer that question for you. And lastly, the rights-based creation. And so we really consider everybody's feelings and thoughts involved when we create tools. And we worked with a lot of teachers across research teams, and they told us, I don't really want to be able to create this. I would love for my district admin team to be able to share this with me. And so that capability exists within the system. So you're able to share that out, and then the teacher of record can only see truly the students that they're teaching. So that is something a spreadsheet simply can't do for you, but multi-test analysis can. All right, so as we talk about ways to look at student progress, these are things we're really telling you stuff that you already know, but we want to make sure that you understand that you can look at this in multiple layers. So this is going to be QuickView's best friend because you're able to filter data and look at it in multiple different ways throughout multi-test analysis. And you get that visual to represent the data. We know, and it is truly research-based, that visuals help you to interpret data much faster and draw conclusions. So this will also exist within multi-test analysis for that exact purpose. And so we'll continue on, and we're going to show you some of those 3 foundational purposes that multi-test analysis really answers the problem and provides you a solution. So here are the 3 key components of what multi-test analysis will do. And some of these we've already talked about, but we're going to get right to it. The first piece that we heard across everybody that we did research is we need a way to track student performance over time. And we are looking at those variety of assessments. So we really want to be able to see trends. If a student is meeting this performance level over time, or if they are not. There needs to be a simplistic way to do that and across multiple tests, which is why we're having that metric conversation. So that is that foundational piece that you will be able to do with multi-test analysis. As we move from there, you will be able to analyze your actual tests that you're giving within the system and see that predictive validity and see that correlation score. Because again, we don't want to rinse and repeat something that is not favoring our data analysis at the end of the day. And finally, you can do those program evaluations as well. So just like I mentioned for science, how well was your current curriculum serving you within your district? And was that a good resource for allocating funds? But you're going to be able to look at a variety of different types of programs within your system and evaluate if those assessments are allowing students to grow or if they're not showing growth over time. So you'll really be able to see that very dynamically within the system. All right, so now we'll take a deeper look, and I'm going to toss it back over to Jeremy to show you what this actually looks like.
Yeah, so we're going to take a deeper dive into multi-test analysis, and I'm actually going to go to one of our demo sites and kind of show you an example of what multi-test analysis is really capable of doing. And then we're going to come back and revisit the slideshow and kind of talk about some of the bits and pieces with perhaps just a little bit more detail. And so to give you some context, it's like, great, I know what multi-test analysis is supposed to help me do. It's supposed to help me not live in spreadsheet world. It's supposed to help me set achievement levels and common metrics or common scale scores or common comparisons. But what does it look like and how is it going to do that? So this is kind of the new area that you're going to see when you first get in, and once you have access to multi-test analysis, you'll see a new button over here right under single test called multi-test. And one of the things that you'll probably catch, and Emily mentioned this a second ago, it's a rights-based access and usability kind of feature as far as creation goes. So when you first get in here, you may actually see this table is going to be completely blank because y'all haven't made any progress profiles yet. And you may not even have this button up at the top that says new progress profile. If you don't see that button, it's because you don't have the right turned on yet to actually do it. So that's just a quick tip. Once multi-test is out at the end of March and you get in here and you get to start playing with it, if you don't see that button, go make sure you turn on the right so that you can create a new progress profile and get started. So here's what one kind of looks like. And keep in mind, it is a demo site, it is demo data. And so a lot of what you're going to see here is just completely randomized bits of information that have been coalesced into something that can kind of just demonstrate what's going on here. And so I have within this progress profile, it's already configured. I already made it. I selected my tests. I configured my achievement levels, and I'll show you how that looks like. But it gives you an interface that lets you see some, in my opinion, some really beautiful visualizations on how are each of my tests stacking up to each other. You may notice that this visual feels very similar to some things in Strive, if your district uses Strive to actually evaluate y'all's internal evaluation processes. And so it's kind of a similar mentality, but instead of evaluating my evaluations, now I'm evaluating my assessments and I'm evaluating that student progress. And based on the 5 achievement levels that I have configured, this is the spread for these 5 assessments over time. And if this was real data, I might be looking at this and catch some insights right off the bat. I can see that this STA 8th grade math test has a pretty even spread, but then the next one, look what happens to the spread. It shifts to the right, and in the sense that there are more kids performing at the higher achievement levels than on the next one. And then we go down and it starts to shift back the other way, and it continues to shift and continues to shift over time or across each of these assessments. So I might be able to see, hey, there's a couple of things that stand out to me here. I now know just at a glance, because I set this up, this 8th grade math STA demo test is one I probably want to take a deeper dive into. I want to use MTA and potentially other tools to ask and answer questions about why is this test different? And Emily's going to dive into some of those other tools here in just a little bit. When I'm looking here, and this is the default view, it's the student view. And as I go down, I can actually hover over each of these bars and I can see the percent of students falling into each of the achievement levels that I've configured as I go down test to test. And so I can get a feel at a glance how these things are doing. But let's say hypothetically, well, achievement level 3, I'm kind of interested about it, but look how it zigzags back and forth. It's hard for me to see achievement level 3. I can click it and I can look just at achievement level 3. How's that one looking? I can click it and look at 4, look at 5 in isolation, or bring them all back. And it lets me really dig into each of those achievement levels and try to answer or even identify some questions. Within the student view, we have been saying constantly, it's not only a good way to kind of evaluate your assessment program and check for validity, but it's also a good way to see student progress over time. I can go to an individual student list and it will populate the achievement levels by student. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit and we're going to look at Senna. Senna is a really good example of, let's pretend each of these assessments were actually across one school year. I had unit 1, unit 2, unit 3 stacked, and then maybe, the winter map, and then, something from the spring. And it was all the same content, all the same grade level. If I was looking at Senna, I could see from test 1 all the way to the end that Senna's achievement levels are increasing. This student is progressing, and that's exactly what I want to see. Eldora right below, and granted I'm missing a couple data points here, but I can see Eldora is climbing pretty sharply as well. This gives me a pretty good indication of how are my kids doing. I've got Rosalie, who's fluctuating pretty wildly across each of the assessments. And so that helps raise some interesting questions. Maybe there's a particular content that we need to focus on for remediation, or maybe there's an intervention that I know that happened between these 2 tests, and that intervention may be informing why that spike happened. And so your local context is going to play a really big role into looking at how these things are changing over time for your students and what they potentially mean. So that's a lot kind of all in one shot. But this is the basics of what multi-test analysis is going to be able to do. When I go to each of these others, kind of like quick views, I can get summary views of how the teacher breakdown works, the school breakdowns, and even the district breakdown at a summary level for each of the assessments. And then built into it, I can also isolate and look at one test at a time. And when I look at one test, I can see all of my students, which school, which instructor they had, and which achievement levels they had with the raw score pulled in. So you can kind of feel for how each of that was going over time. All right. Next thing I want to point out, built-in filters. If you're a user that has access to more than one school, more than one teacher, you have the ability here to filter down to look at individual groups and individual teachers to find some potentially cross content comparisons or cross-campus comparisons. And then we're introducing a new filter behavior in multi-test analysis for demographics, where you have a one-stop shop to identify particular identifiers for the kids. Pick the ones that you want. And once you've selected one or more, hit apply, and it'll apply that filter and show you just those kids that you're looking for within that filter. It's a wonderful tool with a lot of flexibility for you to really dive into and find different layers and stratify what it is that you're trying to analyze and how it's working. The last thing I really want to show, and this really hits home with the predictive analysis that Emily mentioned, is this correlation view. Correlation view is really going to be your bread and butter with actually figuring out the predictiveness or the predictive validity of your assessments. Now, when I look at this, I click the correlation view and I get presented with a list of tests and the actual correlation score. Now, keep in mind, I mentioned earlier, all of this data in our demo site is completely randomized and scrambled. And so we're not seeing good correlation scores at all. Because if you are familiar with correlation scores, you know the closer you are to one, the more positive and strong that correlation is. And these is basically showing there's really no relationship between any of these tests. And because they're random, that actually makes sense. But I can see that the test that I have chosen compared to the test that I selected to compare to, this test has this correlation score, which gives me an idea of, is the test I'm looking at actually predicting the score on the other test? Is it validly and accurately, is there a relationship that exists there that helps me say that my local assessments, how are they comparing to MAP? Or my local assessments comparing to STAR? Or how is MAP comparing to STAR? Or any combination that you want to the one comparative test that you picked. It's worth noting when you expand these, you'll note that these numbers are kind of repeating within each pair, because what is calculating the correlation on are groups of students that took both assessments. And so it's really honing in and narrowing into, these are the kids that took both, so we're getting a really solid comparison between the two. Now, hypothetically speaking, and this is where the correlation view really comes into focus in terms of actually asking questions and making solid decisions. It's actually looking at the achievement level comparison as well. A correlation score by itself does not necessarily mean that the relationship is meaningful. It just means that a potential relationship exists. So is the relationship meaningful? We provide you an achievement level comparison. When you go into the achievement level comparison, I can see right off the bat how the kids are from one test to the next comparing in their achievement level buckets. This group of kids did not change their achievement levels from one test to the next. This group of kids moved up 1, moved up 2, moved up 3, and moved up 4 achievement levels. And then vice versa, moved down 1, 2, 3, and 4 achievement levels. Typically speaking, the more variation you see in students' achievement levels, the less meaningful that correlation actually is. If I see kids that are really I don't see much in the way of big shift, it's mostly in the -1 to +1 on the achievement level change, that means your performance is really consistent from test to test. And so that probably means that your correlation score, if it's high, is a meaningful relationship. But like I said before, local context is super important when looking at this. You know, maybe from one test to the next, what interventions, what programs were adopted, what things that you introduced to see how students may have shifted performance. you may have a really strong correlation, but also an interesting shift in achievement because you introduced or did something to cause that shift. As a hypothetical, let's say your star results in algebra actually had a really heavy right lane, and you had not many kids in the negatives or dropping achievement levels, but you had a whole lot of kids climbing in achievement levels. If you have a strong correlation score and a lot of kids climbing, that might be because locally you did some things to make that happen, and that might mean exactly what you want it to mean. So keep in mind that local context is really important when trying to draw those conclusions. Okay, that's multi-test analysis in a nutshell. It's not quite every single feature, but I do want to show you one of the most important pieces. When it comes to actually making a progress profile, creation is one of the most important steps. You get a wizard similar to if you've ever played Mastery, where there's a couple of different steps. I get to name it, describe it, but multi-test analysis allows you to select any combination of grades that you want. A lot of your progress profiles, you may only want one grade level, and some of them you might want multiple grade levels, and any combination of content that you have available. Within this example, I've chosen 8th and 9th grade with all of my core contents. And then we let you choose the test types you'd like to have included. You can do some that are just, I want star tests with map. That's all I'm really interested in comparing for this one. Or I want this local assessment, that local assessment, and the star, compare those, etc. Or you can just select them all and choose as you want. These selections then allow you to go into and actually find and choose the tests that you want. One of the cool things about it is it will remember which tests you've selected. So if I selected that and then I go search for the word math, everything changes and only a couple of them disappeared, but the ones that I have selected stay. It remembers which ones you've picked. So as you make decisions, you can add and remove various tests as you go, and it'll hold on to that. I'll uncheck that one so I don't mess this one up. Then you get to do your achievement levels. The achievement levels, this is where you get a lot of flexibility. You can have anywhere from only 2 achievement levels all the way to 6 achievement levels within your progress profiles. If you do as few as 2, that really gives you the chance to get down to 2 buckets. Maybe those buckets are met expectations, didn't meet expectations, or met growth, didn't meet growth. Or you can do 4, and you have something kind of like your pretty standard star performance levels, didn't meet, approaches, meets, masters. Or you can do 5 or 6, where you can get really granular, and you can use any variety of names. The achievement levels can be named anything you want them to be. And you could even go so far as to potentially use this to create student groups. Maybe the first group is, depending on the tests and the content that you chose, maybe I want achievement level 1 to be this remediation group, and then that enrichment group, et cetera, et cetera. Once you've configured the achievement levels that you want, then you configure the achievement levels. Now, one of the neat things we've added very recently that's different than if you came and saw this in December, we've added a scored column that lets you see at a glance how many actual student scores have been submitted and scored for each of these assessments. I wanted this 8th grade math unit 1 in here, but there's only 17 kids that have taken it. Maybe I don't want to include that right now. And so it helps you make those decisions as you go. And then you get to choose which metric for which tests you want to actually apply. For the STAR test, maybe I want to do percent score, raw score, performance levels. For MAP test, maybe I want to do RIT instead of projected proficiency. If you're familiar with MAP's the linking studies, you probably have seen those tables that tell you the approximate ranges and windows for the RIT scores for each of the performance levels. You can use that context and build the cut scores or the performance level to achievement level mappings that you want for each of these tests. This is where you turn it into those common scales. This is where you get the meaning to say, this is what this means from this test to this test, and this is what this means from this test to this test, so that you don't have to build formulas for it. MTA will help you build it, and then once you've got it built with the cut scores you want, it applies and assigns everything straight to it for you, and you get your kids banded out right away. Okay, that was a whole lot. Let's go through the slides and make sure I didn't miss anything. We got started with multi-test. You go in, you start making a profile, or you access a profile that's already available to you. You create it by naming your achievement levels, selecting your test types, setting those custom scales across each of the different metrics. We have the district summary, which is going to be pretty much the same for everyone, no matter who's accessing it, because it's a district summary view. You have a school summary, which will vary depending on each of the people. I didn't talk about this a whole lot, but if you share one, and I'm going to talk about how you share here in a minute, shared progress profiles, any teacher will see that progress profile, but only the data that each user is allowed to see will actually populate in the progress profile. So if I make, for example, a fourth grade math progress profile, I can include all the fourth grade math assessments I want for the entire district, share it, and then the teachers or even the principals, as they go and access it, they'll see the data that their rosters or their individual rights allow them to see, including school summaries and teacher summaries and student summaries. The teacher summary, again, it's good. It's going to transition and show you the teachers that you're allowed to see. It's worth mentioning with the teacher and the school summaries, there are some settings that multi-test analysis does honor that you can configure with your quick views that lets you say teachers are allowed to see other teacher summaries on their campuses, or principals are allowed to see other campus summaries for each individual test. And so multi-test analysis will respond to that. Then the student summary, where you really get that power to see progress over time on each individual student. And then we do have an example hypothetical achievement level set up here so that when this spreadsheet or slideshow is shared with you guys, you can actually take a look at that. And it's worth pointing out here that something that's built into multi-test analysis, let's say hypothetically you had like this district benchmark and you were choosing highest level achieved, but I only have 4 achievement levels selected. If I only have 4 achievement levels, but say 5 different performance levels on that test, PL0 all the way to PL4 actually activated, it'll let you know, hey, there's a red status on this one. You might want to choose a different metric. And so if you have one of those mismatches where I have too few achievement levels or too many achievement levels, I can move off of the performance level or highest level achieved and change that to a numeric value to configure that a little more deliberately. There's the selected test example. And okay, let's talk about sharing. Anyone that has the right to share, sharing will be a right space that's separate from creation. So you may want to give the right for people to create, but then you have a right for sharing. Sharing will share the progress profile out with the district. And like I said, it behaves kind of like a shared quick view template or a shared district data view where people are able to get into it, but it's going to limit what the person is able to see based on what their rights or rosters allow them to see. And then here's a good example on some of the differences that the correlation view can actually provide. And so you can get that predictive analysis. Within this particular mock-up, or this actually, this is a snapshot we took off of testing. You can see 2 of the tests, they're all being compared to the spring NWEA growth test. The first 2 tests are not correlating well at all, but that third test is correlating really well. And so maybe I want to go into that achievement level comparison and see why, but then the last one is not correlating at all. And it gives you an error and it'll tell you why it's potentially not giving you a correlation score. And there's typically 2 reasons. It's either A, there are too few, or the data doesn't have an appropriate spread in order to calculate a correlation, or you don't have enough students that took both assessments that you're comparing in order to actually make that calculation. And then here's that predictive analysis, like achievement level comparison. With a couple of examples, you can see that second bar across. This is probably an example where you have almost or a little over 80% of your students are within one achievement level from one test to the next. So that probably means that that correlation, because the performance is stable, is probably a valid correlation if it was high. Okay, that's multi-test analysis in a nutshell. I'm going to pass it back to Emily to talk about test analytics.
Okay, so as we kind of pause and shift gears, test analytics is a tool that is available and aware today for anybody. The way that you identify if you have this enabled in your district is under test authoring. There will be a tab that shows up after you have given the assessment that will say test analytics. So if you go under test authoring in your district and you know you're looking at a test that's already been given and you don't see test analytics, it is Likely because that is not turned on for your district. So the second part of that is, how do you get to turn it on? If you see this today and you get excited, you can easily just email support@eduphoria.net and say that your district would like this feature to be enabled, and we will turn it on for you. And so there are a couple of other pieces that will come with this. And as we cover it, these are some pieces you'd like to consider before just turning it on. That's why we don't automatically turn it on for you. It does have some rich data components in it that are worth district conversation. So as we shift into what in the world is test analytics, it really starts from that ending point that Jeremy just gave you, and how do you actually see the reliability of your assessment or assessments over time. And so when you go to this tool, you're going to have this particular data view that pops up, and it allows you to see some basic information related to the test, how many students took it, the total number of items on the test, and by standard, you can see that type of information. You can also see statistics and quartiles across your actual performance levels within this assessment. And you can see that reliability measure that's brought in here as well. And anything closer to a score of 1 is going to be a more reliable test. So you can also go down to a learning standard view and see how many times you covered a learning standard and the item difficulty associated with it. So all of this is helping you to understand. We assessed the standard a whole bunch, but man, we assessed it and it was really easy for students to be able to get it correct. So it's giving you all of that data broken down and then a bell curve on your raw score distribution. So this particular tool has lots of fun new vocabulary that come with it. You're about to see that on the next slide. And so if you are interested, we embedded our online help for this, but you can easily go search in our online help and look at test analytics so that you can get some more of this vocabulary at a deeper level. But here's some of this. I don't want to hurt you mentally on a Wednesday afternoon, but you are really able to look at a lot of different data points that are collected here. So in some of those, we're looking at the standard deviation and we're looking at different p-values, but we're really trying to help you to interpret, is this an assessment that I should continue to give in my district? And so with some of those measures that you'll see, we are correlating items to tell you if that item is reliable, if the test would actually serve you better and have a higher correlation score if you remove that item. And that's really taking it from where Jeremy left off to your next step. So if you go through multi-test analysis and your correlation score is really low for that particular test, coming into test analytics is going to give you some solutions to move forward. So it will actually pull out and highlight questions that did not correlate overall. And if you were to remove those from the assessment, then your assessment would be more reliable. And so it's going to pull out those different measures for you to be able to make more effective assessments for the years coming. And so all of this information can be found within test analytics and all broken down for you with the values of how you look at this based on if it's too easy, if it's too hard, and what can we remove to move forward to make this test a more reliable one in the future. So again, we don't want you to be stuck in a place where you're like, well, our test doesn't correlate. Now what do we do? So you can actually take that to the next level. And with this at the top of the screen, I also embedded the TEA Technical Digest and really how they structure an environment for you to look at these questions and decide a path forward. So yes, even TEA does have an aligned system for how they structure questions and what could be off within your questioning. So if you want to go look at that guide, it'll show you some suggested path forwards on what could be wrong for you to analyze your question to make it better in the future. And so that is a good resource as you move forward in making assessments, especially the summer. If that's one of the summer projects, then that will be a great tool to utilize and evaluate your assessments. So I'll pause from there. Again, if you're interested in single test or reading single test analysis, if you're interested in test analytics, that's something you can easily email and ask our support to turn on for your district. But again, it comes with a unique set of vocabulary. So you might want to make sure that everybody in your district is ready to have those conversations. The last piece we like to talk about here is single test analysis is another great tool. If you just heard me talk about test analytics and it gave you some indigestion, you don't have to go with test analytics. You can just go to single test analysis and you can utilize this in order to draw some of those conclusions as well. We know that single test analysis gives you that pretty bell curve right off the bat with performance so that you can see those different performance levels, not just by the whole group, but by different populations of students. That helps you draw an immediate conclusion right there. How does that compare with the data that we're normally seeing? And then again, on the Learning Standard Analysis tab, you can easily start looking at those particular skill sets and very quickly identify, we only assessed at level 1. At DOK level 1 on this assessment. That could be why our results are heavily inflated on this test because we didn't include depth of knowledge 2 or depth of knowledge 3. And of course, the vice versa would be true for students who are underperforming if the test was leveled extremely high. And then finally, in single test analysis is where you can really look at that item response. And what I like to focus on here is that answer distribution, because if you're identifying that a large portion of the students got it right, again, then they understand that concept, you can conclude, or were your other answer choices just very far off to where they would absolutely not pick them, and process of elimination very quickly led them to the right answer. Well, then you didn't really assess what you were hoping to assess by that question. You just allowed students to demonstrate that they can get rid of answers that are incorrect. And so single test analysis will really help you filter through a lot of these conversations so that you can identify methods to make your assessment more reliable next year with the data that you're actually getting. And with that being said, I will toss it back over and we are summing everything up and bringing you to a close. Perfect. We're bringing you back together with the 3 pieces that multi-test analysis is really going to solve for you moving forward. These are the pieces that excite me. But again, it's going to be that student performance tracking over time over a variety of different assessments. It's also going to be an assessment review tool to evaluate those tests. And like I said, if test analytics got you very excited, go ahead and email us and we'll turn that on to help with that process as well. And then program evaluation. So we know that you are utilizing multiple different curriculum tools. And at this point in time, you're actually really evaluating if you want to continue to use those tools. So being able to correlate them side by side and seeing where they help you to land at the end of the year is a great resource as well. I did see it come up in questions that you're also asking about when are we going to add other assessment types to multi-test analysis, and that is definitely something that we're always working toward. I don't know if you want to add any insight to that, Jeremy, as well, but we're definitely extending the types of assessments we want you to have available within multi-test analysis. So tossing it back to y'all for your final thoughts, which part of MTA, multi-test analysis, are you the most excited about? So is it the ability to configure those custom achievement levels? No more spreadsheets? Is it the various views that you can see, the graphs, or is it maybe others, all the above? I would say other is all of the above, but it can be anything else you would like it to be too. So give us feedback. What are you really excited about being able to do in this tool? Right, I see mostly B's coming in, some A's and B's, but the various views for analyzing progress, well, that's good. That's exciting. You're excited about the different filtering options that you'll have and how really dynamic that is. Sharing, is anybody excited about sharing? I was really excited about the sharing component myself, and how easy that will be to share out data timely. All right, so we're glad that you joined us today. And now I will officially turn it back over to Armando to close us.
Thank you, Emily. Multi-test analysis is only available for districts that have purchased Premium Aware. If you do not have Premium Aware or Aware Premium and would be interested in learning more about it, please reach out to sales@eduphoria.net. We are glad that this webinar has been able to provide you with an update on the new multi-test analysis tool that will be released this spring. If you need additional assistance on this or for other topics, please email training@eduphoria.net. We want to remind you to visit our teacher learning site for Aware and Strive at teachers.eduphoria.net. Within the teacher site, you will find modules made up of video, text learning resources, supports, knowledge checks, and discussion prompts. The length of the video content ranges from a couple of minutes to about 6 minutes, where teachers can get topic-specific demonstrations on utilizing Aware or Strive. We have an exciting update for the Aware portion of the learning site. New modules have been added for the following Aware Premium tools: Single Test Analysis and Mastery Tracker. If you are interested in course challenges for teachers to show what they know, fill out the interest form and we will get back to you. We have another big announcement for you. Classic Aware will be retiring on June 30th, 2024. We just wanted to share a few of our testimonials from some of our districts. There's been a lot of discussions that we've had with users that say, I still go back to Classic Aware. Nothing wrong with that. But after just 3 minutes explaining new navigation, they say, I am never going back to Classic Aware. We have had over 30 districts that have disabled Classic Aware and are currently using Aware with its new navigation. If you are interested in setting this up for your district, email support@eduphoria.net. We encourage you to explore new navigation by reviewing Aware's top 4 power moves. Don't forget, June 30th, Classic Aware will be retiring. And with that, I would like to thank Emily and Jeremy for hosting. On behalf of today's team and all of Eduphoria, we would like to thank you for joining us on today's webinar about the new multi-test analysis tool in Aware Premium. Have a great day.